Hello. Welcome to the Bore You to Sleep podcast. The podcast that will hopefully help you get to sleep. I am going to read an open source book, one that is not particularly interesting, but one that is hopefully boring enough to get you to sleep. Tonight's reading comes from Natural History of Intellect. This book was published in 1893 and written by famed essayist and poet Ralph Waldo Emerson. My name is Teddy, and I aim to help people everywhere get a good night's rest. Sleep is so important, and my mission is to help you get the rest that you need. The podcast is designed to play in the background while you slowly fall asleep. Thank you to everyone who shared their words of gratitude with me during the week. Firstly, thank you to the new sponsors on Patreon. Monthly subscriptions are what allows this podcast to continue to be made, bringing rest to both you and to those who need it. Those new supporters are Troi, Josh, and Brenna, each with a $5 monthly subscription. Sincerely, thank you for your support. Thank you also to everyone who contacted me through the website. Amber, I am glad to hear that the podcast works when nothing else will. To iTunes listener 93XOLC BYUEIMDO, thank you for your kind words and compliments. And to all Spotify listeners, thank you for continuing to let me know what you thought via Spotify's Q&A within each episode. It's such a fantastic way to hear from you and to hear what you thought about the episode. If you find the podcast beneficial, please be sure to subscribe, as that helps the podcast. And of course, please share it with a friend and leave a review in your podcast app. Even one sentence really helps out. As I mentioned, becoming a patron or sponsor is a fantastic way to support the podcast, and you can do that at boreyoutosleep.com. You can also say hello at boreyoutosleep.com or Instagram at boreyoutosleep. In the meantime, lie back, relax, and enjoy the readings. Natural History of Intellect and Other Papers by Ralph Waldo Emerson. Prefatory note. The first two pieces in this volume are lectures from the university courses on philosophy given at Harvard College in 1870 and 1871 by persons not members of the faculty. The natural history of the intellect was the subject which Emerson chose. He had from his early youth cherished the project of a new method in metaphysics, proceeding by observation of the mental facts, without attempting an analysis and coordination of them, which must, from the nature of the case, be premature. With this view, he had at intervals from 1848 to 1866 announced courses on the natural history of intellect, the natural method of mental philosophy, and philosophy for the people. He would, he said, give anecdotes of the spirit, a calendar of mental moods, without any pretense of system. None of these attempts, however, disclosed any novelty of method, or indeed, after the opening statement of his intention, any marked difference from his ordinary lectures. He had always been writing anecdotes of the spirit, and those which he wrote under this heading were used by him in subsequently published essays so largely that I find very little left for present publication. The lecture which gives its name to the volume was the first of the earliest course, and it seems to me to include all that distinctly belongs to the particular subject. The lecture on memory is from the same course, that on Boston from the course on life and literature in 1861. The other pieces are reprints from the North American Review and The Dial. J. E. Cabot, September 9th, 1893. Natural History of Intellect. I have used such opportunity as I have had, and lately in London and Paris, to attend scientific lectures, and in listening to Richard Owen's masterly enumeration of the parts and laws of the human body, or Michael Faraday's explanation of magnetic powers, or the botanist's descriptions, one could not help admiring the irresponsible security and happiness of the attitude of the naturalist, sure of admiration for his facts, sure of their sufficiency. They ought to interest you. If they do not, the fault lies with you. Then I thought, could not a similar enumeration be made of the laws and powers of the intellect, and possess the same claims on the student? Could we have, that is, the exhaustive accuracy of distribution which chemists use in their nomenclature, and anatomists in their descriptions, applied to a higher class of facts, to those laws, namely, which are common to chemistry, anatomy, astronomy, geometry, intellect, morals and social life, laws of the world? Why not? These powers and laws are also facts in a natural history. They are also objects of science, and may be numbered and recorded, like stamens and vertebrae. At the same time they have a deeper interest, as in the order of nature they lie higher and are nearer to the mysterious seat of power and creation. For at last it is only that exceeding and universal part which interests us, when we shall read in a true history what befalls in that kingdom where 1,000 years is as one day, and see what is set down is true through all the sciences, in the laws of thought as well as of chemistry. In all sciences the student is discovering that nature, as he calls it, is always working, in wholes and in every detail, after the laws of the human mind. Every creation, in parts or in particles, is on the method and by the means which our mind approves as soon as it is thoroughly acquainted with the facts. Hence the delight. No matter how far or how high science explores, it adopts the method of the universe as far as it appears, and this discloses that the mind as it opens, the mind as it shall be, comprehends and works thus, that is to say, the intellect builds the universe and is the key to all it contains. It is not then cities or mountains or animals or globes that any longer command us, but only man, not the fact, but so much of man as is in the fact. In astronomy, vast distance, but we never go into a foreign system. In geology, fast duration, but we are never strangers. Our metaphysic should be able to follow the flying force through all transformations, and name the pair identical through all variety. I believe in the existence of the material world as the expression of the spiritual or the real, and in the impenetrable mystery which hides, and hides through absolute transparency, the mental nature. I await the insight which our advancing knowledge of material laws shall furnish. Every object in nature is a word to signify some fact in the mind, but when that fact is not yet put into English words, when I look at the tree or the river, and have not yet definitely made out what they would say to me, they are by no means unimpressive. I wait for them, I enjoy them before they speak. I feel as if I stood by an ambassador charged with the message of his king, which he does not deliver because the hour when he should say it is not yet arrived. Whilst we converse with truths as thoughts, they exist also as plastic forces, as the soul of a man, the soul of a plant, the genius or constitution of any part of nature, which makes it what it is. The thought which was in the world, part and parcel of the world, has disengaged itself and taken an independent existence. My belief in the use of a course on philosophy is that the student shall learn to appreciate the miracle of the mind, shall learn its subtle but immense power, or shall begin to learn it, shall come to know that in seeing and in no tradition he must find what truth is, that he shall see it in source of all traditions, and shall see each of them as better or worse statement of its revelations, shall come to trust it entirely as the only true, to cleave to God against the name of God. When he has once known the oracle, he will need no priest, and if he finds at first with some alarm how impossible it is to accept many things, which the hot or the mild sectarian may insist on his believing, he will be armed by the insight and brave to meet all inconvenience, and all resistance it may cost him. He from whose hand it came will guide and direct it. Yet these questions which really interest men, how few can answer. Here are learned faculties of law and divinity, but would questions like these come into mind when I see them? Here are learned academies and universities, yet they have not propounded these for any prize. Seek the literary circles, the stars of fame, the men of splendor, of bon mots. Will they afford me satisfaction? I think you could not find a club of men acute and liberal enough in the world. Bring the best wits together, and they are so impatient of each other, so vulgar. There is so much more than their wit, such follies, gluttonies, partialities, age, care, and sleep, and you shall have no academy. There is really a grievous amount of unavailableness about men of wit. A plain man finds them so heavy, dull, and oppressive, with bad jokes and conceit and stupefying individualism, that he comes to write in his tablets, "Avoid the great man as one who is privileged to be an unprofitable companion." For the course of things makes the scholars either egotists or worldly and jocose. In so many hundreds of superior men, hardly 10 or 5 or 2 from whom one can hope for a reasonable word. Go into the scientific club and hearken. Each savant proves in his admirable discourse that he and he only knows now, or ever did know anything on the subject. Does the gentleman speak of anatomy? Who peeped into a box at the custom house, and then published a drawing of my rat? Or is it the pretended discoveries of new strata that are before the meeting? This professor hastens to inform us that he knew it all 20 years ago, and is ready to prove that he knew so much then that all farther investigation was quite superfluous, and poor nature and the sublime law, which is all that our student cares to hear of, are quite omitted in this triumphant vindication. Was it better we came to the philosophers, who found everybody wrong, acute and ingenious to lampoon and degrade mankind? And then was there ever a prophet burdened with a message to his people, who did not cloud our gratitude by a strange confounding in his own mind of private folly with his public wisdom? But if you like to run away from this besetting sin of sedentary men, you can escape all this insane egotism by running into society, where the manners and estimate of the world have corrected this folly, and effectually suppressed this overweening self-conceit. Here each is to make room for others, and the solidest merits must exist only for the entertainment of all. We are not in the smallest degree helped. Great is the dazzle, but the gain is small. Here they play the game of conversation as they play billiards, for past time and credit. Yes, 'tis a great vice in all countries, the sacrifice of scholars to be courtiers and diners out, to talk for the amusement of those who wish to be amused, though the stars of heaven must be plucked down and packed into rockets to this end. What with egotism on one side and levity on the other, we shall have no Olympus. But there is still another hindrance, namely practicality. We must have a special talent and bring something to pass. Ever since the Norse heaven made the stern terms of admission that a man must do something excellent with his hands or feet, or with his voice, eyes, ears, and with his whole body, the same demand has been made in Norse earth. Yet what we really want is not a haste to act, but a certain piety toward the source of action and knowledge. In fact, we have to say that there is a certain beatitude, I can call it nothing less, to which all men are entitled, tasted by them in different degrees, which is a perfection of their nature, and to which their entrance must be in every way forwarded. Practical men, though they could lift the globe, cannot arrive at this. Something very different has to be done, the availing ourselves of every impulse of genius, an emanation of the heaven it tells of, and the resisting this conspiracy of men and material things against the sanitary and legitimate inspirations of the intellectual nature. What is life but the angle of vision? A man is measured by the angle at which he looks at objects. What is life but what a man is thinking of all day? This is his fate and his employer. Knowing is the measure of the man. By how much we know, so much we are. The laws and powers of the intellect have, however, a stupendous peculiarity of being at once observers and observed. so that it is difficult to hold them fast as objects and examination, or hinder them from turning the professor out of his chair. The wonder of the science of intellect is that the substance with which we deal is of that subtle and active quality that it intoxicates all who approach it. Gloves on the hands, glass guards over the eyes, wire gauze masks over the face, volatile salts in the nostrils, and no defense against the virus, which comes in as secretly as gravitation into and through all barriers. My contribution will simply be historical. I write anecdotes of the intellect, a sort of farmer's almanac of mental moods. I confine my ambition to true reporting of its play in natural action, though I should get only one new fact in a year. I cannot myself use the systematic form which is reckoned essential in treating the science of the mind. But if one can say so without arrogance, I might suggest that he who contents himself with dotting a fragmentary curve, recording only what facts he has observed, without attempting to arrange them within one outline, follows a system also, a system as grand as any other, though he does not interfere with its vast curves by prematurely forcing them into a circle or ellipse, but only draws that arc which he clearly sees, or perhaps at a later observation, a remote curve of the same orbit, and waits for a new opportunity, well assured that these observed arcs will consist with each other. I confess to a little distrust of that completeness of system which metaphysicians are apt to affect. 'Tis the gnat grasping the world. All these exhaustive theories appear indeed a false and vain attempt to introvert and analyze the primal thought. That is upstream, and what a stream! Can you swim up Niagara Falls? We have invincible repugnance to introversion, to study of the eyes instead of that which the eye sees, and the belief of men is that the attempt is unnatural, and is punished by loss of faculty. I share the belief that the natural direction of the intellectual powers is from within outward, and that just in proportion to the activity of thoughts on the study of outward objects, as architecture or farming or natural history, ships, animals, chemistry, in that proportion the faculties of the mind had a healthy growth, but a study in the opposite direction had a damaging effect on the mind. Metaphysic is dangerous as a single pursuit. We should feel more confidence in the same results from the mouth of a man of the world. The inward analysis must be corrected by rough experience. Metaphysics must be perpetually reinforced by life, must be the observations of a working man on working men, must be biography, the record of some law whose working was surprised by the observer in natural action. I think metaphysics a grammar to which, once read, we seldom return. It is a manila full of pepper, and I want only a teaspoonful in a year. I admire the Dutch who burned half the harvest to enhance the price of the remainder. I want not the logic, but the power, if any, which it brings into science and literature. The man who can humanize this logic, these syllogisms, and give me the results. The adepts value only the pure geometry, the aerial bridge sending from earth to heaven, with arches and abutments of pure reason. I am fully contented if you tell me where are the two termini. My metaphysics are to the end of use. I wish to know the laws of this wonderful power, that I may domesticate it. I observe with curiosity its risings and settings, illumination and eclipse, its obstructions and its provocations, that I may learn to live with it wisely, court its aid, catch sight of its splendor, feel its approach, hear and save its oracles and obey them. But this watching of the mind, in season and out of season, to see the mechanics of the thing, is a little of the detective. The analytic process is cold and bereaving, and, shall I say it, somewhat mean as spying. There is something surgical in metaphysics as we treat it. Were not an ode a better form? The poet sees holes and avoids analysis, the metaphysician dealing as it were with the mathematics of the mind, puts himself out of the way of the inspiration, loses that which is the miracle and creates the worship. I think the philosophy is still rude and elementary. It will one day be taught by poets. The poet is in the natural attitude. He is believing. The philosopher after some struggle, having only reasons for believing. What I am now to attempt is simply some sketches or studies for such a picture. Memoirs pour server toward a natural history of intellect. First, I wish to speak of the excellence of that element, and the great auguries that come from it, notwithstanding the impediments which our sensual civilization puts in the way. Next, I treat of the identity of the thought with nature, and I add a rude list of some bylaws of the mind. Thirdly, I proceed to the fountains of thought in instinct and inspiration, and I also attempt to show the relation of men of thought to the existing religion and civility of the present time. We figure to ourselves intellect as an ethereal sea, which ebbs and flows, which surges and washes hither and thither, carrying the whole virtue into every creek and inlet which it bathes. To this sea, every human house has a waterfront, but this force, creating nature, visiting whom it will and withdrawing from whom it will, making day where it comes and leaving night when it departs, in no fee or property of man or angel, it is as the light, public and entire to each, and on the same terms. What but thought deepens life and makes us better than cow or cat? The grandeur of the impression the stars and heavenly bodies make on us is surely more valuable than our exact perception of a tub or a table on the ground. To be is the unsolved, unsolvable wonder. To be, in its two connections of inward and outward, the mind and nature. The wonder subsists, and age, though of eternity, could not approach a solution. But the suggestion is always returning, that hidden source publishing at once our being, and that it is the source of outward nature. Who are we and what is nature have one answer in the life that rushes into us. In my thought, I seem to stand on the bank of a river and watch the endless flow of the stream, floating objects of all shapes, colours, and natures, nor can I much detain them as they pass, except by running beside them a little way along the bank. But whence they come or whither they go is not told me. Only I have a suspicion that, as geologists say, every river makes its own valley, so does the mystic stream. It makes its valley, makes its banks, and makes perhaps the observer too, who has found the boundaries of human intelligence, who has made a chart of its channel or approached the fountain of this wonderful Nile. I am of the oldest religion, leaving aside the question which was prior, egg or bird. I believe the mind is the creator of the world, and is ever creating, that at last matter is dead, that mind makes the senses it sees with, that the genius of man is a continuation of the power that made him, and that has not done making him. I dare not deal with the element in its pure essence. It is too rare for the wings of words. Yet I see that intellect is a science of degrees, and that as man is conscious of the law of vegetable and animal nature, so he is aware of the intellect which overhangs his consciousness like a sky, of degree above degree, of heaven within heaven. Every just thinker has attempted to indicate these degrees, these steps on the heavenly stair, until he comes to light where language fails him. Above the thought is the higher truth. Truth is yet undomesticated and therefore unformulated. It is a deep stare down from the essence of intellectual pure to thoughts and intellections. As the sun is conceived to have made our system by hurling out from itself the outer rings of diffuse, either which slowly condensed into earths and moons, by a higher force of the same law, the mind attaches minds, and a mind attaches thoughts or intellections. These again all mimic in their sphericity the first mind, and share its power. Life is incessant parturition. There are viviparous and oviparous minds, minds that produce their thoughts, complete men, like armed soldiers, ready and swift to go out to resist and conquer all the armies of error, and others that deposit their dangerous, unripe thoughts here, and there to lie still for a time, and be brooded in other minds, and the shell not be broken until the next age, for them to begin, as new individuals, their career. The perceptions of a soul, its wondrous progeny, are born by the conversation, the marriage of souls, so nourished, so enlarged. They are detached from their parent. They pass into other minds, ripened and unfolded by many. They hasten to incarnate themselves in action, to take body only to carry forward the will which sent them out. They take to themselves wood and stone and iron, ships and cities and nations and armies of men, and ages of duration, the pomps of religion, the armaments of war, the codes and heraldry of states, agriculture, trade, commerce. These are the ponderous instrumentalities into which the nimble thoughts pass, and which they animate and alter, and presently, antagonized by other thoughts which they first aroused, or by the thoughts which are sons and daughters of these, the thought buries itself in the new thought of larger scope, whilst the old instrumentalities and incarnations are decomposed and recomposed into new. Our eating, trading, marrying, and learning are mistaken by us for ends and realities, whilst they are properly symbols only, when we have come, by a divine leaning, into the inner firmament. We are appraised of the unreality or representative character of what we esteemed final. So works the poor little blockhead mannequin. He must arrange and dignify his shop or farm the best he can. At last he must be able to tell you it or write it, translate it clumsily enough into the new sky language he calls thought. He cannot help it. The irresistible meliorations bear him forward. And that concludes tonight's reading. I hope you've enjoyed listening to this story. And if you're not quite tired yet, please feel free to listen to another episode of the Boy to Sleep podcast. Until next time,